Welcome, my friends, to a new episode of Frameworks. In this episode, we're going to talk about the triple I framework. Now, the question is, what do these three I's stand for? And I would say these three I's stand for illustration, interaction, and induction. And this is what we're going to talk about in today's episode. And the triple I framework is a framework for teaching language. And to be very specific, it is for teaching spoken grammar. What do we mean by spoken grammar? We mean by spoken grammar the grammar of English language conversation. So where did this framework come from? And actually, the idea of this framework was mentioned for the first time in a paper by two wonderful professors, Ronald Carter and Michael McCarthy. Now, these two gentlemen wrote a paper in 1994, and in this paper they discussed a different framework from PPP to introduce language. And it was a wonderful paper where they actually suggested the triple I framework for teaching spoken grammar. And they said that they want this to be the focus, not the grammar used in writing, but they wanted this framework to be for spoken grammar. But what are the features that Professors Carter and McCarthy talked about regarding the triple I framework lessons? And I would say that feature number one is exposing learners to natural spoken data. We mean that candidates need to be exposed to real life examples of language. We need to build up our lessons on dialogues and conversations that happen in reality. Feature number two is helping learners to become observers of grammar in its natural context. And when I say observers of grammar, it means that I don't need direct teaching here. I want actually to lead the students to explore and discover. How would they explore and discover? By comparing dialogues and by comparing conversations taken from real data so that they discover how grammar works. Feature number three, providing learners with tasks which foster comprehension and production at the same time. And this means that we need to surround these dialogues and conversations, the real data that we found. We need to build up tasks around these dialogues. And these tasks would help our students discuss and talk about grammar. So this would develop two things: their conversation and their production and their speaking, and also the researcher skills and observations and studying grammar together. Now, feature number four, avoiding overemphasis on production in grammar. Like, yes, production is important, but it is not the most important thing. We don't need to overemphasize production. It needs to be there, but it's not everything. It doesn't need to overshadow the discussion of language and the discussion of structures. So these are the main four features of the triple I framework for teaching language. Now let's think about the stage aims. And let's think first about the three I's. So starting with illustration. Why do we have this stage? And this stage is there to provide students with real data on grammar. Someone might say, Shadi, what do you mean by real data on grammar? Do we have unreal data on grammar? And I'd say, yeah. Real data on grammar means how people speak out there on the streets. That's real data on grammar. Unreal data on grammar is talking about how people on the streets should be speaking. So there is a big difference between how people speak and how people should be speaking. So this framework is about what happens in reality and taking what happens in reality to the classroom. And this is why we have this illustration stage, which means that in the illustration stage, there must be real data related to grammar. And in this stage, students need to be exposed to different dialogues and different conversations so that they can compare and build up an opinion about the target grammar. Now moving to the second stage, which is interaction. And the main aim behind this stage is providing students with opportunities to discuss their observations, share their opinions, talk about the structure, the spoken grammar that is targeted by the teacher. So it is the time when the students discuss together how grammar works. And then we come to the third I, which is induction. And induction, that term reminds you of inductive teaching. And inductive means indirect. So this means that teaching here in this stage has to be indirect. And when we say indirect teaching, what comes to our mind is self-directed discovery. And this is what this stage is all about. It's about introducing language in an indirect way. So instead of me guiding students, no, I will design tasks that would help students explore on their own, discover on their own. And this is why the main aim behind this stage is helping learners to come up with the targeted grammar rules. I'm not going to give you the rules as a teacher. You're going to discover these rules. You're going to discover these rules yourselves. Now, if we're thinking of a full framework that can be taken to be applied in classrooms, of course, we would add to the triple I a couple of stages. Lead-in first, and then you go to illustration, and then you go to interaction, and then you go to induction, and then we can add a usage stage. Why a usage stage? So that students can produce the target language freely. So there is a bit of usage, there is a bit of production here. Then we come to a very important question. And it's an obvious one. From where are we going to get the real data for the illustration stage? And that's a problem that would face every teacher who wants to work with this framework. The resources. And I would say there is a wonderful and free resource for every teacher that is out there. And you can go and get endless of texts on any target language you want. And this is the website englishcorpora.org. And this is a website that shows you a lot of corpora. And again, when we talk about corpus, when we talk about corpora, we're talking about millions and millions of texts. And you have a search engine, and you can write in that search engine whatever you want. And you can get many results and study these results, compare them, and discover a lot of things about language. And if we look at the list that we have here, and we want to choose a good corpus for spoken English, obviously our eyes would fall on the TV corpus and the movie corpus, because everything in the TV corpus, everything in the movie corpus, of course, would be spoken. You can also use the other corpora. You can go to the COCA, the American corpus, but when you go to the American corpus, you need to make sure that you choose the spoken ones. Why? Because the III framework, one of its main feature is that you focus on a spoken grammar using this framework. So your grammar needs to be utilized, needs to be used in a spoken language. And let's see how this website works. So as you see, we've got here, a search engine, we've got find matchings. All what you need to do is to write the language item you're looking for. For example, let's write, is it okay if? And when we click it, look at what you see. We have 68 examples, wonderful. And look at where these examples are taken from. As we see, many movies, The Masked Saint, Sticky Notes, Ordinary World, The Greasy Strangler, and you name it. And look at the example. Is it okay if the dog comes? Is it okay if we eat first? Is it okay if we put in an order for room service? And again, you can click on one of these and get the full conversation, the full dialogue taken from that movie. And you can adapt it. If there is something that is culturally inappropriate, you make sure you remove it, put something else, build up a whole conversation, and then use this conversation as a text to build your III framework on it. And that's a very wonderful source for the illustration stage. Another source would be using course books, but not any course books. Course books that would provide their students with dialogues from real life, real conversations. And one of these books, for example, is Interchange by the wonderful Professor Jack C. Richards. And Jack C. Richards is a big name when it comes to communicative language teaching. And his book is one of the most wonderful books in the history of ELT, Interchange, wonderful piece of art. And the guy built this whole book on many real life dialogues, which is actually what McCarthy and Carter were talking about. They were talking about real data taken from real live conversations. This is how Interchange is built, because usually in every module or in every unit you find a wonderful conversation. Look at this example we have right now. And this is actually what I decided to use when adapting a lesson for the III framework. Let's look at this page. And it says lend a hand. So it's about, helping others and asking for favors and all that stuff. And as you see, we've got a conversation here between Carlos and Kiko. And it's a very real conversation. So I decided to use that book to build a III lesson. So let's see how I did this. And let's think about a leading. And when I look at a lesson like that, it's about lending a hand, helping other people, favors. And I might ask my students about how they respond to their neighbors' requests, their friends' requests. What if someone asks you for a favor? Do you say yes? Do you say no? Stuff like that. Also, Jack C. Richards suggests using the quote, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and you start with that and you build on this. Wonderful. We talked before about leading. We know how to use leading to generate students' interest in a topic. Now, let's move now from leading to illustration. And in the illustration stage, I started by a kind of a prediction task. And as you see the question, I use the picture given in the Coursebook in Interchange, and I put these questions suggested by the teacher guide. What are they doing? What are they talking about? What does Kiko want from Carlos? Will Carlos help? How do you know? Then students will think about that on their own, and then they discuss together. And after they discuss together, I take them to the dialogue. Now they can either read the dialogue, listen to the dialogue, and then discover whether they were right or wrong. And when they read the dialogue, now they will be exposed to the target language. And the target language here is informal and formal requests. So if you look at the conversation, we have here Kiko saying, "Hi, Carlos, I was wondering if you could help me. I was wondering if you could help me." And then when we move forward, we see, "Can I borrow your truck?" That's another request. And it keeps going. "Would you mind helping me put them in your truck on Sunday?" And it goes like that. So we have the structure scattered inside this dialogue, and the students are being exposed to this conversation. And as you see, it's a real live conversation, right? It's a natural one. Now, I decided to give my students in the illustration stage a third task. And in this third task, I used 2 more conversations from Interchange. I decided to change the places, okay, adapt them, and use them in my illustration stage. Why? Because in the illustration stage, it is great when students are exposed not only to one dialogue, but more than one dialogue, so that they have the opportunity to compare these dialogues and look at them and see the language repeated in different texts. So here we have, listen to 2 more calls Kiko makes. What else does she need help with? Do her friends agree to help? And then they listen. And then after that, I give them the text to read and check. And when you look at the text, we have it again. We have also more requests, like we have in the one here on the left, we've got, I was wondering if you could help me. And it goes like that. On the other one, we've got also another, I was wondering if you could do me a favor, and would it be okay if I left my goldfish? And so the target language is repeated there over and over and over again. Right, and then after that, I said in number 3, underline all the requests in the 3 previous dialogues. So they have to go to now the previous dialogue, these 2 as well. So we've got 3 dialogues now. Now students need to do what? They need to go to all these 3 dialogues and try to find all the requests. Wonderful. They search for that. And when they search on their own first, I give them time to compare it together, and I give them feedback after that. So TPS. Or think, pair, and share. They think on their own, then after that they work in pairs or groups, and then after that they go to feedback, and I start telling them about things or telling them about the correct answers. And then after that, in the illustration stage as well, I expose them also to 3 more texts. So here is a question here, taken also from Interchange, but it just, changed the order of these activities so that I put many texts in the illustration stage. I said, listen to 3 telephone conversations, write down what each caller requests. Does the other person agree to the request? Check yes or no. Wonderful. And then after they listen, after they finish the activity, I give them the 3 texts. So again, they read, they're exposed to more requests. And again, I ask them, underline all the requests in the 3 previous dialogues. So now in the illustration stage, I gave them 6 different dialogues where they are exposed to the target language in 6 dialogues, so they can compare, they can see how requests are made in 6 different dialogues. And that's wonderful when it happens in the illustration stage. Then I decided to move to the interaction stage. So now in the interaction stage, I wanted my students to discuss their observations, to share their opinions, to talk together about the target grammar. And I actually adapted this activity, again, based on the 6 dialogues I had from Interchange. So I put, as you see, the 6 dialogues here, and I said, read the text one more time and arrange the request structures in the following chart, starting with less formal requests to more formal ones. And I took this idea from Interchange, but the difference I made is that I made this activity based on the 6 texts. In Interchange, it was just 6 sentences or 7 sentences, and students rearranged them according to which is less formal, which is more formal. But I decided to do this to be based on texts, right? Good. And again, and that would give my students some focus on the usage of requests, which one is more formal and less formal. And then after that, I moved to structure. And I took 3 from the texts from Interchange. And then I decided to focus on the structure by, for example, look at text number 1. I said, Kiku's saying, "Hi, Carlos, I was wondering if you could." And then I gave my students 3 options. Is it, I was wondering if you could help, or helped, or helping? And then they choose the right form of the verb. And then when you move a bit down there, can I borrow, borrowed, borrowing? And then down there, would you mind, help, helped, helping? And this would give them some kind of focus on the form. And of course, I would follow in my teaching the TPS, think, pair, and share. So I give them this activity to think about on their own, and then they compare their ideas together, and then I give them feedback, and it goes like that. Another interaction activity to focus on pronunciation. And again, the first idea is actually taken from Interchange, and the second one is my idea. So the first one, circle the unreleased consonants in the conversations, then listen and check. So this is more about elision. And again, so when the students look at A, I was wondering if I could borrow. So they need to learn that you say, I could borrow, I could borrow. You don't need to pronounce the D sound. So again, that's the focus here, okay? Would you mind giving, mind giving, mind giving. So you don't need to pronounce the D sound here. So this is more about elision. And then I added part number 2, which is more about assimilation. So students would say, could you, and do you mind, and would you mind? And so I want them to learn how to say, could you, right, in connected to speech quickly. Could you lend me your truck, please? And it goes like that. So I asked them, how would you pronounce the underlying parts in connected to speech? And again, they think on their own, and then they discuss together, and then after that, I give them feedback. So I turned the MPF, meaning, pronunciation, and form, into activities. And these activities would get the students to discuss, which is what we want to happen in the interaction stage. Then we come to the final stage, which is induction. And induction is all about taking the results from the interaction stage and writing down rules. So that's how I design my induction stage. And I put the first question up there: what are the structure changes that happen to more formal requests? And I wanted by this question to direct the attention of my students that when requests are less formal, they're less complicated when it comes to grammar. And when they are more formal, they're more complicated when it comes to grammar structure. And then question number 2, complete the following rules. And then can I, they need now to say infinitive. And I would answer the first one with them, then let them think on their own, and then TPS again, think, pair, and share. And then we come to the third question here, which is what is the pronunciation tendency behind pronouncing the sound j when the words in bold are connected? And I want my students to discover the assimilation tendency behind the j sound, which is the d meeting y, and it goes like that. So again, that's the time when they write the rules with their own hands. And my role as a teacher would be just confirming, okay, the results that they have come to. Then we come to the final stage, which is usage. And I decided to use Jack C. Richard's idea from Interchange, which is really wonderful. So write a message to a classmate asking for several favors. Explain why you need help, and then pair work, exchange messages. And the reason why I say that this is a wonderful idea is for the Triple I framework is because, as we said, the Triple I framework is about spoken grammar. And this activity suits the spoken grammar very much. Someone might say, Shed, but this is not a speaking activity, it's a writing activity. Yes, but it's interactive writing, which has a lot of the features of spoken grammar. It's like writing on Facebook and WhatsApp. Very, very close to speaking. And sometimes we call it conversation in a slow motion. And that's why I'm happy with the activity here to end my framework. So the Triple I framework, my friends, to sum up. The Triple I, these three I's stand for illustration, interaction, induction. And it's a language framework, and mainly for spoken grammar. And one of the most important thing about this framework, that in the illustration stage, make sure that your students are exposed to more than one dialogue, one conversation, so that they have the opportunity to think and compare. So my friends, thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Until we meet again, my friends, bye-bye. And don't forget, I'll be down there in the comments if you have any questions.